Thank you. We will take the vote on this item at the end of regular business. Orders of the day.
Ballot item number 32, Order M65. Second reading of Bill 65, an act to amend the Highway Traffic Act to provide rules for the use of roundabouts. Mr. Harris.
The member for Kitchener-Conestoga.
Speaker, I move second reading of Bill 65, an act to amend the Highway Traffic Act to provide rules for the use of roundabouts.
Mr. Harris has moved second reading of Bill 65, an act to amend the Highway Traffic Act to provide rules for the use of roundabouts. First, you understand in Order 98, the member has 12 minutes for his presentation. The member for Kitchener-Conestoga.
Well, thank you, Speaker. Speaker, I stand today, 2 years after first introducing a private member's bill, to have roundabout rules written into the Highway Traffic Act, to finally debate the need for those rules and the need for consistency as called for in the Safe Roundabouts Act 2015. Over those 2 years, I've made numerous attempts to bring this government's attention the fact that with more than 40 roundabouts across Waterloo Region in my area, and more being constructed in communities across the province, it's our responsibility as legislators to move forward on enhancing roundabout safety here in the province of Ontario. To date, that call has not been heeded, and I hope that together we can change to that situation today. But before I get rolling too far here, let me say off the top, I am a big fan of roundabouts. Again, with over 40 in my area, I've come to understand the many well-established operational benefits they can provide to traffic flow, speed, and severity of collisions. That said, I've also come to understand that while roundabouts have their advantages, whether it's in my region of Waterloo, in Hamilton, Ottawa, or Windsor, concerns over consistency of rules for pedestrians, cyclists, and motorists continue to grow as roundabout construction increases. Quite simply, Speaker, as the Highway Traffic Act currently fails to address roundabouts whatsoever, my bill seeks to remedy that omission by both 1, defining roundabouts, and 2, giving the Minister of Transportation the ability to establish clear, uniform rules throughout Ontario. Specifically, if MPPs in this House join me in this effort, the Safe Roundabouts Act will update the Highway Traffic Act to include a definition of a roundabout as an intersection with one-way circulation counterclockwise around a central island where entering traffic must yield the right-of-way to the traffic circulating within the intersection. Further, the Act would further require the Minister to consult. The Minister must conduct a study and consult with the public about the safe use of roundabouts. He will have to report. The Minister is required to table a progress report every year until a regulation to address the safe use of roundabouts is made. And third and finally, act. Following consultation, the Minister is to make regulations establishing rules of the road that apply to roundabouts. This consultation requirement would address a series of factors, including the use of crosswalks, signs and markings, lighting, commercial vehicles, speed limits, signaling, entering and exiting roundabouts, uniformity of road design standards, including consistency in lane width, and of course compliance with accessibility standards. This will not only raise awareness on how to maneuver through a roundabout, but increase pedestrian, cyclist, and motor safety, helping to reduce accidents across Ontario. Speaker, as I noted off the top, it's been 2 years since I first introduced this legislation to enhance safety at roundabouts across the province. In fact, it's actually been 3 years since I first got to work on the concern. It was actually one of the first issues I faced as a new MPP. It was an early morning, just days before being first elected in 2011, that a 16-year-old St. Mary's High School student in Kitchener crossing the southbound lanes near the Homer-Watson Block Line Road roundabout was struck by a city bus exiting the roundabout, causing serious injuries. When I looked into the matter, I was shocked to find out that not only are roundabout rules not included in the Highway Traffic Act, they're not even defined. It's as if legislatively roundabouts don't even exist. Since that day, Speaker, I've used every tool at my disposal: petitions, letters, media conferences, meetings, and yes, private members' bills, to get this government's attention and have this clear safety concern addressed in the Highway Traffic Act. To bolster my work and to follow up on a major effort the region of Waterloo has already undertaken to educate all members of the public on roundabouts, I also called on government to require new drivers to undertake a roundabout road test for their G and G2 license to prove they are able to properly navigate traffic circles in the province. Time and again, I've been met with ministerial rejection, refusal at times, ridicule, despite the obvious need for action. It's a bit of a head-scratcher, Speaker, as this is a clear issue of safety. There's no partisan politics here, and there's a relatively easy fix. But yet, it's a fix that for some reason, this government has so far refused to endorse. First, it was Minister Shirelli responding that he would not add roundabouts to driving exams in communities where roundabouts exist. Then there was the bizarre characterization from then Transportation Minister Glenn Murray that he wasn't interested in the smaller issues like roundabouts and that I was disconnected from the real issues. I remind you that there are 42 roundabouts of varying size in Waterloo Region today, up to 17 circles to be added by 2016, more than 20 in Ottawa, and easily more than 100 across the province. There's no doubt this is a real and not a small issue. And that's not just me saying it, Speaker. Brian Patterson of the Ontario Safety League has noted that, quote, by implementing this bill, we will increase safety, expand public education, and reduce crashes in the community. Doug Switzer, the President and CEO of the Ontario Motor Coach Association, indicates with the increasing use of roundabouts by municipalities, it's imperative that MTO establish standards for their safe design and construction. Speaker, at this time, I'd also like to welcome a road safety partner we all know, CAA, Elliot Silverstein. Elliot, thanks for joining us today in the debate, and thank you for your support. Elliot, representing CAA South Central, tells us the Safe Roundabouts Act is designed to make roundabout intersections safer for all road users. CAA is pleased to support this initiative in making Ontario's roads safer. And again, thank you, Elliot and CAA, for your ongoing work to make Ontario roads the safest in North America. And at last night's meeting of Waterloo Region Council, the region of Waterloo passed the following motion. They said, whereas there is an increase in the building of roundabouts by the province and municipalities across Ontario, and whereas the Safe Roundabouts Act 2015, Bill 65 is of course scheduled for debate in the Ontario Legislature. Therefore, be it resolved that the regional municipality of Waterloo endorse the principles proposed in Bill 65, the Safe Roundabouts Act 2015, and request the province of Ontario to review and amend the HTA to clarify legislation and/or regulations relating to roundabouts in order to enhance public safety, driver awareness and education, and enforcement mechanisms. Speaker, that was passed unanimously last night by Waterloo Region Council, and I thank them for doing that. Of course, last Friday I was honoured to be joined at the Homer Watson Block Line Roundabout by Mr. Silverstein from CAA and Waterloo Region Police Service Chief Brian Larkin to support my efforts and ensure the safety enhancements of Safer Roundabouts Act would provide. Bottom line, this is not a small issue. This is not a solitary community issue. This isn't a blue, orange, or red issue. It's just smart policy based on road safety. And yet, much as the previous ministers of transportation chose to ignore my calls and tie on the blinders, my renewed efforts to get the attention of the current minister in letter, at committee, and in the weeks leading up to today's debate has been met with a similar lack of urgency. He tells us, quote, the HTA already covers the actions a driver must take in a roundabout. Speaker, the word roundabout is never mentioned once in the existing legislation. In the meantime, the silence of the HTA gives way to differing interpretations, with the provincial government and municipalities calling for different practices for signalling and yielding pedestrians. Right now, we have a situation in my area where the MTO tells drivers to slow down and watch for pedestrians, whereas the region says pedestrians go first. When entering or exiting the roundabout, drivers should yield the crosswalk to pedestrians. It's the same for signaling. While both the region and the province agree that drivers should signal right when exiting a roundabout, the region directs drivers planning a left turn, driving all or most of the way around the circle, to signal left, while the province is mute on left signaling. Over in Ottawa, they're going through the same discussion and confusions. Ottawa's manager of traffic management, Greg Kent, has expressed his frustration with the city's inability to give pedestrians the right-of-way at roundabouts under provincial law. He, too, has highlighted the fact that the Act doesn't define roundabouts yet, and he, too, has called for the MTO to update the law. Without the guidance of one provincial law for all, the road is open for different areas to establish varying directions, leaving both drivers and pedestrians unsure as to how they are expected to navigate a roundabout. A motorist who follows the local rules, say in Waterloo Region, may not necessarily be heeding the protocols of other areas. And it's a problem across the board. In my years of working on the issue, I've met with motorists of all types, and whether it's truck, bus, or automobiles, the only consistency when it comes to roundabouts is the consistent concern for the lack of consistency. Truckers and other large vehicle operators I've spoken to, for instance, are faced with different challenges as they enter different municipalities across the province. Varied lane widths, multiple lanes, varying locations for pedestrian crossings, and conflicting rules for right-of-way. A little consistency would go a long way to enhancing safety right across Ontario. The fact is, Speaker, the lack of any mention whatsoever in the HTA leaves everyone, motorists, truckers, bus drivers, pedestrians, and cyclists alike with questions. When can I enter? How do I exit? Where do pedestrians cross? And ultimately, who has the right of way? Speaker, to sum it up, roundabouts in Ontario are a reality. They are here to stay. The need for rules is obvious, and the fix is easy, and easily supportable by representatives of all stripes. I look forward to the members' input today and ask that when it comes to the vote, together we can take a united stand for the enhanced road safety that will result from passage of the Safe Roundabouts Act. As Mr. Audit from the Waterloo Region Record put it when I first introduced legislation for roundabout safety, it's time to end the runaround on roundabouts. Let's rewrite the law. And Speaker, today I'm hoping that we'll pass the first step in doing so, and I of course look forward to the debate from my colleagues from around the House, and I'll conclude at that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. For the debate, the member for Kitchener-Waterloo.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and it's my pleasure to stand in this House in support of M65, Safe Roundabouts Act 2015. And one of the reasons that I think is so important for me to stand up and support the member from Kitchener-Conestoga on this is that, you know, there's this sort of thinking around this place that, you know, what happens in one riding doesn't necessarily affect others. And the fact of the matter is that people just don't drive in their own ridings. And roundabouts are an emerging issue, a safety issue in the province of Ontario. And I must tell you on a personal note, I mean, there was some resistance when roundabouts were first introduced to our riding, but people have come climatized to them. But because they recognize that there are environmental benefits, you know, and there's traffic flow. And Waterloo Region is one of those places, a good place to grow, and we are growing, and we're trying to adapt to that, and we're trying to do it responsibly. But there is no doubt that the Ministry of Transportation has not kept up to date on this issue. And I think that the member from Kitchener-Waterloo, the asks that he has put forward in this bill are very reasonable. I mean, increased signage, safety, these are something that we should be able to find some consensus on and work together. And in this context and in this environment of this legislature, in this time, in these times, there are good reasons for us to try to find some consensus. And private members' bills, we all know, don't always go very far. But on the issue of safety and on the issue of modernizing our transportation infrastructure, I think that we should be able to find some common ground. And I would just like to say, I mean, there are great inconsistencies across the province as it relates to roundabouts. And some local municipalities have installed inconsistent signage or created new confusing rules for roundabouts, apparently unable to get consistent advice from the MTO. For example, the City of Ottawa recently installed signs requiring pedestrians to yield to cars at roundabout crosswalks, apparently believing, wrongly, that there are different Highway Traffic Act rules for roundabout crosswalks than other uncontrolled crosswalks. So this has led to conflict between pedestrian and cyclists and cars and trucks and buses. And I must tell you, we've had some pretty close calls for students in Waterloo Region. In 2011, a St. Mary's high school student was seriously injured at the roundabout. Another student was injured while crossing the same roundabout last year. And we've had our first death, actually, very sadly, Mr. Speaker, at a Waterloo roundabout, which occurred last year after a motorcycle entered into the roundabout. So there's a bit of urgency to actually modernizing this piece of legislation. And I wanted the member from Kitchener-Conestoga to know that he's recognized that this is a Waterloo Region issue, and that all MPPs from these ridings recognize that this is an issue. We just don't drive in our own ridings, Mr. Speaker. And so the NDP is fully supporting this private member's bill. We hope that it passes, we hope that it gets to committee, and we hope that the legislation is updated. Thank you very much.
Thank you. For the debate, the member for Cambridge.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's interesting that all Waterloo Region MPPs, my colleague from Kitchener-Conestoga and also from Kitchener-Waterloo, are certainly concerned about this. I always call Waterloo Region the roundabout capital of Ontario. So do we know roundabouts? And I certainly hear the concerns across all of our stakeholders and all of the members. So I really want to thank them for their comments today. So Bill 65 seeks to amend the Highway Traffic Act to enable the minister to make regulations establishing rules of the road that apply to roundabouts. So I'm very pleased to rise today on behalf of my constituents in Cambridge to be able to participate on this bill. I'd like to begin by reiterating the fact that our government truly is proud of the fact that our roads are among the safest in North America, but there's always more that can be done. The safety of our roads and those who use them are amongst the highest priority for our government, and certainly from all members in this House. We do know there's more that can be done, so that's why we've introduced bills like Bill 31, the Making Ontario Roads Safer Act, which is now being carefully considered and examined by members of the Standing Committee on General Government. Bill 31 not only serves to protect drivers on our road, it also introduces a number of provisions that will help keep pedestrians and cyclists safer in Ontario. It includes a provision that requires drivers to remain stopped at any pedestrian crossover or school crossing until those crossing the street are off of the roadway. But let me specifically speak to Bill 65. As previously mentioned, Bill 65 would amend the Highway Traffic Act to enable the Minister of Transportation to make regulations establishing rules of the road that apply to roundabouts. The bill also stipulates that before making a regulation, the Minister must conduct a study about the safe use of roundabouts and must consult with members of the public. In addition, the Minister is required to table a progress report in the Legislative Assembly every year until a regulation is made. Speaker, roundabouts are very important parts of Ontario's roadways. In fact, roundabouts are proven to reduce pollution, fuel consumption, and reduce delays by limiting idling times and slowing down traffic. I know this is an important local issue for all of those living in Waterloo Region, and it's why all of us have spoken to the Minister of Transportation about this issue on many occasions. Myself, the member from Cambridge, and the member from Kitchener Centre have also spoken to him on these occasions. Clearly, this is the intent as well behind Bill 65. And though I agree with the principle behind Bill 65, there are a number of issues with the bill as it currently stands. The annual reporting section is particularly concerning, especially given that it comes from a party who purportedly despises what they refer to as the addition of any kind of government red tape. This section in particular would come at significant cost to the taxpayer, both in time and in money. There's also some question about how Bill 65 intends to include roundabouts within the Highway Traffic Act. The Highway Traffic Act, as it stands now, contains existing rules that govern how a driver operates a motor vehicle on the highway. These rules are set out in such a way that they're adaptive to the situations that drivers encounter, and this includes roundabouts. The HTA also references the type of traffic control that's used at intersections, such as stop signs, yield signs, traffic signals, or an uncontrolled intersection, rather than the specific type of intersection, such as T-intersections, Y-intersections, cross-intersections, and roundabouts. Drivers follow traffic rule based on the intersection's traffic control. Roundabouts are controlled by yield signs. So as a result, roundabouts are already covered under the HTA's definition of an intersection. What's also interesting is that in a jurisdictional scan across Canadian provincial traffic legislation, it reveals that while some provinces do include definitions for what a roundabout is, no province in Canada actually has additional rules of the roads specific to the operation of a roundabout. That's why, Mr. Speaker, we believe that it's important that we emphasize the importance of driver education rather than just to legislate this issue. In terms of public education, and I agree with the member from Kitchener-Conestoga and the member from Kitchener-Waterloo, that we really do need to focus on more driver education. So far, the MTO has implemented guidelines and policies for the design of roundabouts on provincial highways and implemented provincial standards for signs, pavement markings, and lightings at roundabout. In fact, the policies and guidelines for the design of the roundabouts on provincial highways are also available in the MTO Roundabout Resources document. Municipalities that are considering putting in roundabouts in their roadways may reference this document as well. The Ministry has also drafted an up-to-date Ontario Traffic Manual, Book 15, Pedestrian Crossing Facilities, and introduced Bill 31, as I previously mentioned, which will allow alternate treatments for pedestrian crossings to improve pedestrian safety at uncontrolled crossings, and that also includes roundabouts. But we know that public education is essential to encourage safe driving through a roundabout, not only from the Ministry, but also from the municipalities that currently have roundabouts in Ontario. The official driver's handbook has been updated to provide drivers with information on how to safely drive through roundabouts. In particular, the handbook was expanded to include information on driving through roundabouts and dealing with particular situations at roundabout. In addition, the Ministry of Transportation continues to work with its road safety partners, and especially within the region of Kitchener-Waterloo, to educate the public on the correct use of roundabouts. In partnership with the region of Waterloo's Active and Safe Routes to School Committee, members have trained students and pedestrians on proper crossing through a roundabout. And this is particularly important when you consider some of the issues that have happened outside schools in Waterloo region of recent years when it comes to negotiating pedestrians and vehicles through a roundabout. The MTO also has an interactive website with information on roundabouts, including a brochure and a video that's available on the Ministry's website. And this is particularly important to those drivers that have been on the road for many years, are not attending driver's education programs right now, and are not actually reading the current official driver's handbook. Interestingly, my son Alex, who's now 21 years old, is currently going through a program for driver's education, and he was actually out on the road yesterday, and lo and behold, he had to actually do a roundabout yesterday. So I called him last night and today to talk through his experience. And what he told me was not only in driver's education did he get schooled on what he was to do and what signs to follow in a roundabout situation. When he did the online training of the course, he was also given training online to know what to do in a roundabout, how to safely proceed through it and how to safely look to the signs and follow the yield signs through it. So yesterday, with his first experience, he didn't tell his driver that I was working on not only roundabouts but Bill 31. And his experience was this. He approached the roundabout in a safe manner. He was able to enter and exit safely, and his driver, instructor, didn't have to make one comment. So I'm very proud of that, and I think it speaks to our education program and how effective that's going to be. So in order to wrap up, Speaker, I just must say again that I do agree with the principle behind this bill. If it passes today, goes into committee, and is brought forward for consideration, we'll have an opportunity at that time to hear from stakeholders and the public and possibly move amendments to strengthen the bill. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to this today.
Thank you. For the debate, the member for Wellington Halton Hills.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to speak briefly this afternoon on Bill 65, an act to amend the Highway Traffic Act to provide rules for the use of roundabouts, standing in the name of the member for Kitchener-Conestoga. I was very pleased to hear the member for Cambridge just now, who I believe is also the parliamentary assistant to the Minister of Transportation, say that she agrees with the principle of Bill 65. And as we know, Mr. Speaker, the second reading vote on any piece of legislation, any bill in this House, is on the principle of the bill. And while we may have some minor disagreement on some of the details, if we agree with the principle of the bill, we vote for the bill at second reading. That allows the bill then to be referred to a standing committee of the House where we can have more public hearings, more opportunity for people to talk about, and there's a number of groups, of course, that have an interest in this issue and like to see it passed, and then we can discuss amendments. So I would take from that, and I would hope that the parliamentary assistant to the Minister of Transportation has just recommended to her colleagues that they support the bill at second reading this afternoon, and that we can get this bill passed. The member for Kitchener-Conestoga deserves enormous credit for the work that he does on behalf of his constituents in Kitchener-Conestoga, and I was privileged to serve much of his riding when I was the MPP for Waterloo-Wellington, and those were great years for me between 1999 and 2007, and I have enormous affection for those communities and the many people that I had the opportunity, the good people of Waterloo Region, who I was privileged to serve for so many years. And Michael Harris is doing a much better job than I ever did on their behalf, and I commend him for it. But this is a good bill, and of course he's brought forward the concern that has, I think, originated in his community about roundabouts and the need for consistency in terms of regulations. And I think that what he's bringing forward is very sensible. What he's suggesting is there needs to be an amendment to the Highway Act to enable the minister to make regulations establishing rules of the road that apply to roundabouts. Before making a regulation, the minister must conduct a study about the safe use of roundabouts and must consult with members of the public. The minister is required to table a progress report in the Legislative Assembly every year until a regulation is made. Mr. Speaker, the very first time that I had the opportunity to drive on a roundabout was in Great Britain in, I think, 1993, and my wife and I had made before we had children, we had a trip to Britain, and we rented a car, and of course I was driving on the left-hand side of the road from the right-hand seat, and it was a bit more difficult than I thought it was going to be, but I was able to do it without incident or accident. But the first time we were on a roundabout, my wife was navigating beside me, and she had the map, and we got onto the roundabout, and I said, "Where do I get off?" And she wasn't sure. And we kept going around. I said, "I'm not getting off this roundabout until you tell me where to get off." So we actually went around probably 6 times before we finally discovered the proper race. And I say that in jest to make fun of myself to some degree, but also the fact is, I think people using a roundabout for the first time, it does take some, you have to become accustomed to them, and people do need to have the practice and the experience to feel confident using them safely. And I think the member is absolutely right. We need to have standardization of regulations, and by bringing forward this bill this afternoon again, I think he's doing a public service for his constituents, not only in Waterloo Region but across the province. I commend him for it, and I would encourage all members to support Bill 65 this afternoon when we get the chance to vote. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. For the debate, the member for Niagara Falls.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for allowing me to speak on the Safe Roundabout Act here today. As you've already heard earlier today, we will be supporting the bill. This bill seeks to make sure that the roundabouts in this province are made safe and properly educated drivers, and by giving municipalities clear instructions when it comes to putting up signs on roundabouts. I'm sure most of the people in this House know this is a relatively new issue for us here in North America. London, England has been using roundabouts for almost a century. Yet there are very few down in Niagara until relatively recently. They are growing throughout Ontario. This is not just an issue around Kitchener. We all drive around the province, but down in Niagara, they are growing. We now have them using them successfully in Niagara Falls. There's one on Mountain Road. There's one on Highway 55, which handles the traffic there. And of course, a beautiful one at Queenston Heights, right before you go to the historic Queenston. Like I said yesterday when I stood up and spoke, come on down to Niagara, enjoy our area, and now you get to enjoy the roundabouts. And hopefully you don't do like my colleague did from the Conservative Party and drive 6 times around it to figure out how to get off. I'm hoping it's a little easier in Queenston to do that. The research on this seems to indicate that properly designated roundabouts can be a safer alternative. The key word here is properly designed. If a roundabout reduces speed to around 30 kilometers, it makes collisions on our roads less fatal to those involved. No one likes to talk about collisions on our roads, but they do happen. We can continue to work to make our roads safer, and this seems to be one way to do it. Though again, I want to say it again, they must be properly designed. If a roundabout doesn't properly address the speed of the car or the flow of traffic, there is no evidence to support that they are better than a regular intersection with traffic lights. So that's important to note as we begin to see more and more roundabouts being built. They need to be properly designed to make our roads safer. And that's important for all of us. Mr. Speaker, the idea behind roundabouts is simple. The car that is in the roundabout has the right of way, and the car entering the roundabout must yield to the drivers inside until there is a safe time for them to enter. So everybody understands the roundabout. Outside the controlling of the speed of the car, another major concern with the introduction of roundabouts is making sure that there is a clear rule on how pedestrians are to cross the roads. And we've seen some of those incidents in the Kitchener-Waterloo with some students. Here in Ontario, it's commonly accepted that cars yield to the right-of-way to pedestrians. Though this is more technical under the Highway Traffic Act, largely cars will stop for someone crossing the road. Today in Ontario, roundabouts are controlled under the Highway Traffic Act as uncontrolled intersections. The technical law here is that a car does not need to stop for a pedestrian until they are actually on the roadway. Now think about that. Let me repeat that. A car does not need to stop for someone until they're actually stepped on the road. It's hard to see why. It's not hard to see why that's pretty dangerous. Outside of being dangerous, it's also very confusing. We have reports that a roundabout in Ottawa must yield to cars. And then in Waterloo, they're told to cross once a car has slowed down. So you can see in 2 cities in the same province, here we have different set of laws around how to cross a roundabout. As for the Act itself, it creates a definition for a roundabout that is added to the Highway Traffic Act. Considering the confusion that is already occurring around them, this not only makes sense, but it seems to me to be necessary. From the Act, allowing the minister to make regulations concerning roundabouts, the use, and says that the minister must consult the public. This is important, consult the public before any regulation changes. And we can talk about the education and how we do that, obviously, during the consultations. Mr. Speaker, roundabouts are becoming very popular here in North America, and certainly very popular in my own riding of Niagara. If built correctly, they can be used safely and protect our drivers and pedestrians. Clearly, something like this needs to have a definition in the Highway Traffic Act. If there are already signs going up in different cities with different sets of rules, then it's also clear we have a problem. This act would give the minister the power to address these issues and to solve the problems. And if we're going to become used to roundabouts, then this needs to happen, because at the end of the day it has to be done safely. The number one goal of the Minister of Transportation should be to keep our roads safe and to make sure our drivers and our pedestrians feel safe using those roads. There are roundabouts here in the province, and their regulations is falling behind. In order to make sure the minister keeps our roads as safe as we like them, let's get some clarification on this issue. And I thank you very much for your time to speak today.
Thank you. Further debate, the Minister of Environment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I only have a couple of minutes, so I'll get right to the point. One is, no province in Canada is doing what has been asked and has rejected this when asked. Why? What do the traffic engineers tell you, and what do most local municipalities tell you, having been a mayor of a city that introduced these in another province? There is one set of pedestrian priorities and controls for yield and stop at all intersections, all the same. Whether it is a T intersection, a Y intersection, a cross intersection, a roundabout, or any other. That is the law in Canada. If we were to change it, and you were in Kenora or you were in Ottawa, you would not see this changing on the other side of the border, because, to my friends from the Niagara Falls region, pedestrian priority is pedestrian priority. If you want to change that or strengthen it, there's something called the Road User Safety Bill that's before this House right now. You could, and it actually has a section on strengthening and clarifying the role of pedestrian priority in Ontario. I have said to the member, don't think we need another committee, because I remember I sat through the minority government where you and your colleagues read off every panel and committee we'd ever created, and it just kills me when you guys come back with every time there's a difficult problem you want a committee. So take some of the ideas that are in here, because I'll give you credit, there's some very good ideas in here around education and around that. You could take the definition of a roundabout, which is in the ministry's guidelines right now. You could apply it to the law. There is design standards that we put forward consistent with every province. But what you're suggesting is that Ontario has its own set of rules at a time when every transportation ministry for the last 20 years has had the same definitions of pedestrian priority in all intersections, has had the same standards apply, whether it's a T, a Y, a roundabout, or whatever it is, and those are consistent. And I even raised this when I was at Transportation Minister, so my colleagues, and I got the same reaction from their traffic engineers. So in fact, if you want to have a patchwork of different rules, that's it. Or you're going to have to define every type of intersection in law, which would be kind of crazy.
Point of order.
Yield my minute and 44 seconds back to him.
Thank you. Further debate?
So I think there's real issues here.
Minister, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Further, Minister, your time's up. Further debate. The member for Thornhill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to welcome one of my constituents that's here that was already introduced, Elliot Silverstein from CAA. And as Elliot knows, there have been some new roundabouts in my riding in the Thornhill Woods neighbourhood, and they're quite close to a school.
and they were designed very wide, so that cars actually did not even have to slow down in the roundabouts. I heard many complaints, as did Elliot, I'm sure. People were not trained to drive in roundabouts. Many people said they had never driven in a roundabout, and they were concerned for their kids' safety. The schools were concerned because the roundabouts were very close to schools. And I think that we have to sort of say to ourselves, either we're going to be a province where we have roundabouts on a regular basis, that people are used to it, because even if you're trained, as the member from Cambridge said, even if you're trained to drive in a roundabout in driver's education, if 10 years goes by before you're actually in one, that's not going to make you feel very comfortable. The last thing we need, Mr. Speaker, are drivers getting on the road in snowy conditions or icy conditions and coming into a roundabout for the first time. What I question is why have roundabouts in some areas? It does keep the flow of traffic. We're all frustrated when we see street lights, traffic lights, where there's no traffic crossing us and we're sitting and we're waiting at a red light. It's not a busy time of day, and we think to ourselves, well, there must be a better way. It's not very environmental. It's very time-consuming for the public. So I think that roundabouts do have their place where we need something maybe more than a stop sign, or something instead of a stop sign where the cars are coming to a complete stop, and oftentimes there's no traffic around, and that creates a lot of pollution and damage to the cars in wear and tear. On the other hand, traffic signals are very expensive, Mr. Speaker. We don't want to be putting up traffic signals in the middle of neighborhoods. There are options. Right near my home, there's a traffic signal where only a pedestrian can trigger it. So I think that I do support the member from Kitchener-Conestoga. I went to school, to university in Waterloo, and I guess it was so long ago that I can't recall any roundabouts in the areas. But I think that if pedestrians aren't used to them, there's two universities, Wilfrid Laurier and Waterloo, in or near his riding, and the students come from other areas all over the province. They're distracted, they're young, they're in a rush, and if they're having to cross through roundabouts without being comfortable, without driving through the roundabouts, without ever having driven through a roundabout before, I think that we can do better. Roundabouts need to be uniform throughout the province. As my colleague said, the only thing that's consistent is the lack of consistency. And I would mention that I find the same thing with handicap parking, where the municipalities set the rules and people can go from one riding or one municipality to another and experience different rules over handicap parking, which is very unfortunate, because the last thing we want to do is make it very difficult for people who are having to park their car under difficult circumstances with a relative or themselves who require help. Just one look at the ministry webpage on roundabout underlines this lack of consistency about what is a roundabout, whether they're safe for pedestrians, and as an optometrist, I'm concerned about the visually impaired in roundabouts, cyclists, older drivers. How can they accommodate large trucks and equipment? And what I would also mention is, how can they accommodate snow cleaning? I think we can see just beside Queen's Park on Harvard that the bike lane is often full of snow, and we're designing bike lanes for summer conditions while we're encouraging people to ride their bikes in the winter, Mr. Speaker, without the right kind of snow clearing equipment available for them. Thank you, and I'm happy to support my colleague and to make roundabouts safe.
Thank you. Further debate, the member for Timmins, James Bay.
Well, thank you, Speaker. I just want to add a voice of support to the bill. I heard what the minister opposite had to say, but listen, it's got to start somewhere. If we took that approach, basic things like health care wouldn't be existing in this land. It took a government in Saskatchewan to be offside with every province and then the federal government here in Canada to put in place health care. So if we have to wait for the 10 provinces or 11 provinces, depending how you count it, and the federal government getting together, that's like trying to amend the notwithstanding clause of the Constitution. It ain't going to happen, so sorry. I appreciate the argument, but somebody's got to lead, and quite frankly, Ontario at times leads on things. The Premier, for example, is trying to lead a discussion on pension reform. And if we were to wait for every other province, and if we were to wait for the federal government, none of this would be done. So to make an argument, you can't do this because we're going to be off step and out of sync with other provinces, I think, it's not the way the Canadian experience has been. I will just say, I know the first time I was in a roundabout, and I want to admit it wasn't in Ontario, it was somewhere where the sun was nicer, and they certainly had better wine, and très bon manger au sud de la France. But it was confusing the first time that you went in it. But once you got the concept, it was actually quite good, because the sense that I got, and I'm not an expert on this, it's a heck of a lot safer. T-bone accidents, when it comes to cars, smashing into the side of somebody because they blow a stop, the worst that can happen there is that you glance them on the side, which is probably a higher degree of survivability. So I say, let's pass this bill, let's get on.
Thank you. Further debate? The member for Bruce Gray.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Proud to support my colleague Michael Harris from Kitchener-Conestoga, and I commend him for bringing this bill forward. He's always thinking of the safety of his constituents first and foremost, and this is another one of those. I believe he brought this bill in response to some troubling crash statistics for roundabouts in his riding, namely the roundabout at Homer Watson Boulevard and Blockline Road in Kitchener. I also understand the Regional Chief of Police's concerns and supports the member's call for clarity with respect to roundabout rules so that all motorists have that confidence behind the wheel. I support Bill 65. I believe we need consistent rules for roundabouts in an effort to improve road safety for pedestrians, cyclists and motorists across Ontario. This bill outlines specific steps and actions required of the Minister of Transportation. Number one, to consult, the Minister must conduct a study and consult with the public about the safe use of roundabouts. Two, to report. The Minister is required to table a progress report every year until a regulation to address the safe use of roundabouts is made. And three, to act. Following consultation, the Minister is to make regulations establishing rules of the road that apply to roundabouts. Currently, motorists are not familiar with the rules of using a roundabout. Road users are not clear on the use of crosswalks, signs and markings, lighting, commercial vehicles, speed limits, signaling, entering and exiting roundabouts, uniformity of road design standards, including consistency in lane width and compliance with accessibility standards. We need to take concrete steps, as outlined in my colleague's bill, promote safety and make them user-friendly for all. Mr. Speaker, the Blue Mountain Resort Roundabout was Grey County's first roundabout. Opened up in 2009, and my colleague Jim Wilson, Simcoe Grey, and currently our interim leader, a joint venture among Grey County, the Blue Mountains, Blue Mountain Resorts, and the federal government. The partners used the gas tax revenues it received from the federal government for the project. And closer to home for me, Elvanley Roundabout. Since the province has been silent in its responsibility to fund this project, I will use this opportunity to now remind the Minister of Transportation that his government has a responsibility to fund it. Bruce and Grey counties proposed years ago to build a roundabout at the intersection of Highway 21 at Elvanley and the Grey-Bruce County line. County engineers believe the roundabout would help prevent crashes because motorists must slow down to negotiate the curved roadway. So the counties asked the MTO to include the roundabout work as part of the province's planned $8.8 million rehabilitation in 2014 of Highway 21 from Port Elgin to Elvanley. According to local Georgian Bluffs Mayor Al Barfoot, and I quote, "Design drawings were finished many months ago and the project is virtually construction ready," end of quote. The province has had since, and again I quote, 2013 to complete the work needed for this roundabout. So what's stalling it? The MTO. They're playing hooky, Mr. Speaker. In fact, the MTO wrote the county to say, if you agree to pay for the roundabout, we'll prioritize it. Well, clearly the MTO has expressly ignoring the fact that the intersection is part of a provincial highway and connecting links, so the MTO is responsible for covering the cost of the project. Minister, your ministry has made statements about the roundabouts being good solutions for rural areas with minimal pedestrian traffic and having the ability to accommodate farm machinery and large trucks. Clearly, we're talking about provincial highways and connecting links which fall under your jurisdiction. Your office has had maybe 50 or so provincial roundabouts in various stages of planning, design, and construction across the province. Why are you playing hot potato with the roundabout at the intersection of Highway 21 and the Grey-Bruce line? Perhaps you'll consider sharing the gas tax revenues with us rural folks. Mr. Speaker, a personal note, my wife Michaela is from Morecambe, Lancashire in England. We went there for our honeymoon, and I have to say that was my first experience with a roundabout. It was a bit crazy at times, driving on the wrong side of the road, on the wrong side of the car, and came to this roundabout. I missed her turn off for Morecambe, Lancashire, Morecambe Bay, where she's from. She had a bit of a fit because I missed this turn, and I said, relax, you just go in the circle, we'll catch it the next time around. I thoroughly thought it was an efficient system. I believe they're very safe, and I think there's something that are actually adding to our congestion challenges in some of our areas. In a lot of places, Elora and Randy Pettipies, my colleague from Perth Wellington has them, certainly Jim Wilson's riding, Michael's riding, a lot of places. I think they're great additions. People, of course, takes a bit to get to know them, but once they're onto them, a very, very efficient, a very, very safe, and I commend my colleague Michael Harris once again for bringing the safety of not only his constituents but all Ontarians to the fore with this bill, and I support it fully. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, and I remind the member once more, we refer to our colleagues by riding, not first name, not name.
Kitchener-Conestoga. Sorry, Speaker.
Thank you. I now go back to the member for Kitchener-Conestoga. You have 2 minutes.
Yes, thank you, Speaker. Well, I first would like to thank the members that chimed in on the debate this afternoon on the Safe Roundabouts Act, Bill 65. Of course, my colleague from Kitchener-Waterloo, Catherine Fife, definitely want to thank her for her comments and her support of this bill. As well, my own colleague from Wellington-Halton Hills, Ted Arnott, the member for Niagara, who now obviously has roundabouts in his beautiful city of Niagara Falls. I look forward to getting up there and experiencing some of those roundabouts, as well as all the other things good in Niagara. Of course, the Minister of the Environment, the member for Timmins James Bay, Thornhill, and finally my colleague from Bruce Grey Owen Sound. Thank you for their input and consideration of the very real safety enhancements that could result from passage of the Safe Roundabouts Act. I also want to thank those who have endorsed the direction of my bill as we've moved forward in today's debate. Again, the CAA, Elliot Silverstein here with us today. Thank you for joining us. The Ontario Safety League, Ontario Motor Coach Association, the Waterloo Region Police Service, of course, to our new police chief, Brian Larkin, who I know will also be making it an issue at the Chiefs of Ontario Traffic Committee. And of course, Waterloo Region Council, who last night passed unanimously a resolution in support of the overall themes within the bill. You know, with regard to some of the ministries or other members' comments that the HTA, as it stands currently, already covers the actions a driver must take in a roundabout, I would point out one more time that the word roundabout does not even appear once in the Act, and that it is a clear omission that needs to be addressed. So, Speaker, I look forward to the vote this afternoon. I've only got 10 seconds left. That will result in enhancing and being a leader here, not only in Ontario, but across Canada and North America, a leader in road safety by incorporating roundabouts within the Highway Traffic Act and creating rules for their safe use. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you very much. We'll take the vote on this item at the end of regular business.